June 21st, 2023. The gavel echoed through the Anchorage courtroom as Judge Peterson delivered a sentence that would seal Denali Brehmer's fate forever. 99 years in prison for orchestrating the brutal murder of her own best friend. No possibility of parole until she is well into her 80s. But what most people do not understand about Brehmer's punishment is that Alaska made a choice decades ago that would make her existence behind bars far more torturous than any execution chamber could ever deliver. By the end of this investigation, you will see exactly why Denali Brehmer's daily reality inside Alaska's only women's prison represents something far worse than death itself. Stay with me, because what I am about to reveal about her life behind bars will change how you think about justice forever. Judge Peterson's words during sentencing painted a chilling picture of the crime that shocked Alaska. This was a premeditated murder for hire, tragic and senseless. Brehmer's conduct was cold and calculated, and carried out to perfection. The judge had watched video evidence of 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman's final moments, with her duct taped on the ground at Thunderbird Falls. He described it as one of the most difficult pieces of evidence he had ever witnessed in his position. What makes this case particularly devastating is the nature of the relationship between victim and killer. Cynthia Hoffman had a learning disability and functioned at a younger developmental level than her actual age. Her father had described Denali Brehmer as Cynthia's best friend after they met in high school. The person Cynthia trusted most in the world was the one who orchestrated her death for money from an online stranger. The murder itself was the result of an elaborate catfishing scheme. Darren Schillmiller, a man from Indiana, posed as a millionaire online, and he offered Brehmer money in exchange for killing someone. Brehmer recruited 4 of her friends to help execute the plan, and she specifically selected Hoffman as the target. The betrayal runs deeper than most people can comprehend. This was not a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. It was a calculated business transaction where a friendship was sold for cash. But here's where Brehmer's story takes a turn that reveals the true horror of her situation. Alaska abolished the death penalty in 1957, 2 years before statehood. The Alaska Territorial Legislature passed a simple measure stating that the death penalty is, and shall hereafter, be abolished as punishment for any crime. This made Alaska, along with Hawaii, the first states in the western United States to outlaw executions. They remain the only states to have never had capital punishment in state law, as states. This decision was not made lightly. Historical records reveal troubling disparities in Alaska's territorial death penalty application. Out of 183 murderers convicted between 1935 and 1958, 138 were white, but the only 2 black defendants, Austin Nelson and Eugene Lamore, were executed, along with 1 Native American, Nelson Charles. No one of any other race faced the death penalty. The system was clearly broken, and Alaska chose a different path. That different path is what seals Denali Brehmer's fate in ways most people never fully grasp. Without the possibility of execution, her 99-year sentence becomes something far more psychologically devastating. Death provides an endpoint, a final moment where suffering concludes. What Brehmer faces is decades upon decades of the same routine, the same walls, the same isolation, stretching into a future that holds no hope of meaningful freedom. Consider the mathematics of her situation. Brehmer is currently 24 years old. With a 99-year sentence and Alaska's parole eligibility requirements, she will not be considered for release until she is in her 80s. That assumes she lives that long and demonstrates exemplary behavior for over 60 years. Even then, parole is far from guaranteed for someone convicted of such a heinous crime. This means Brehmer will likely spend more time in prison than she has been alive. Every birthday, every holiday, every significant moment for the next 6 decades will occur within concrete walls. She will watch herself age in a small cell mirror. She will experience the physical deterioration of old age while still confined. She will lose her 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s to the Alaska Department of Corrections. But the location of her confinement adds another layer of psychological torment, and it makes her situation uniquely brutal. Denali Brehmer is housed at Hiland Mountain Correctional Center in Eagle River, approximately 25 miles northeast of Anchorage. This facility represents her entire world now, and understanding what Hiland Mountain really is reveals why her existence there might be worse than any death sentence. Hiland Mountain is Alaska's only women's prison. Let that sink in for a moment. In a state covering over 600,000 square miles, there is exactly one facility designed to house female inmates. This means Brehmer has no possibility of transfer to a different environment, no hope of finding a better situation elsewhere in the state system. Hiland Mountain is her permanent address until death. The facility opened in 1977 as a minimum security prison for men. It was converted to a women's prison in 1986, and it sits on 105 acres with a housing capacity of 443 inmates, while a $19 million expansion in 2018 added new housing, medical facilities, and classrooms. The fundamental reality remains unchanged. This is a concrete fortress in the Alaska wilderness, where Brehmer will spend the rest of her natural life. Overcrowding at Hiland Mountain creates additional psychological pressure that compounds the isolation. The facility operates at or near capacity regularly, meaning personal space and privacy become luxury items that simply do not exist. Every interaction, every moment of potential solitude, is shared with hundreds of other women who are also serving long sentences for serious crimes. The psychological impact of this environment cannot be overstated. Studies show that prolonged incarceration in overcrowded facilities leads to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and complete mental breakdown. For someone facing more than 60 years in the same building, these effects become magnified exponentially. Brehmer's mind will adapt to prison life in ways that make normal human interaction impossible, even if she ever reaches parole eligibility. What makes Hiland Mountain particularly devastating for someone like Brehmer is the complete absence of anonymity that other inmates might find in larger prison systems. In a facility housing just over 400 women, everyone knows everyone else's story. Word travels fast in confined spaces, and Brehmer's case received massive media coverage throughout Alaska. Every inmate, every guard, every staff member knows exactly what she did and why she is there. The crime she committed violates the most fundamental code that exists even among convicted criminals. She betrayed someone who trusted her completely, someone who was vulnerable and innocent. In prison culture, there are hierarchies of respect and contempt, and those who harm the defenseless occupy the lowest possible position. Brehmer did not just commit murder. She committed the ultimate betrayal against someone who could not defend herself. This reputation follows her through every interaction at Hiland Mountain. Mealtimes become exercises in social navigation, where other inmates decide whether to acknowledge her existence or treat her as invisible. Recreation periods transform into psychological warfare, where hostile stares and whispered comments serve as constant reminders of her status. Even mundane activities like laundry or cleaning duty become opportunities for other prisoners to express their disgust. The daily routine at Hiland Mountain grinds away at inmates through sheer monotony and institutional control. Brehmer wakes each morning to fluorescent lights flooding her cell at the same predetermined time. There is no gentle awakening, no natural sunlight, just harsh artificial illumination cutting through whatever dreams might have provided temporary escape from her reality. Breakfast arrives through a slot in her cell door at precisely 6 in the morning. The food is designed for survival rather than satisfaction. Powdered eggs, institutional oatmeal, and coffee that tastes like dishwater become her daily sustenance. For someone who once had the freedom to choose what to eat and when to eat it, every meal serves as a reminder of her complete dependence on the system. The recreation yard at Hiland Mountain offers no real relief from the claustrophobic atmosphere inside. Surrounded by razor wire and guard towers, The outdoor space provides a view of Alaska's wilderness that she can observe, but never access. Mountains stretch endlessly beyond the fence line, representing a freedom that exists somewhere beyond her reach, but will never again be part of her world. Alaska's harsh climate adds another dimension to the psychological torture of long-term imprisonment at Hiland Mountain. Winter months bring extended periods of darkness that can last up to 19 hours per day in some parts of the state. Even with artificial lighting, the facility becomes a tomb of perpetual twilight, where seasonal depression affects nearly every inmate. During these dark months, Brehmer faces the crushing weight of knowing that the outside world continues its natural rhythms, while she remains frozen in time. Other people experience the changing seasons, holiday celebrations, and life milestones, while her existence remains static. Christmas, New Year's Eve, birthdays, and anniversaries all blend together into an endless succession of identical days marked only by institutional schedules. The visitation policies at Hiland Mountain create their own form of psychological warfare for long-term inmates like Brehmer. Family members must complete extensive background checks and travel significant distances to reach the facility. These are not casual family gatherings, but controlled interactions monitored by correctional staff, where every conversation is recorded and every gesture is observed. For Brehmer, these visits become increasingly painful as the years stretch on. She must watch family members age, while she remains trapped in the same environment. Nieces and nephews she might have known as children will grow into adults she will never really understand. Parents and siblings will develop health problems and face life challenges that she can only observe from behind glass barriers. The medical care available at Hiland Mountain represents another source of daily humiliation for inmates serving lengthy sentences. Every health concern, every medical appointment, every prescription medication becomes subject to institutional approval and oversight. Privacy regarding personal health matters simply does not exist in this environment. As Brehmer ages in custody, she will face the inevitable physical deterioration that comes with growing old in prison. Chronic health conditions will develop and worsen while she depends entirely on correctional medical staff for treatment. The dignity of making healthcare decisions for herself disappeared the moment Judge Peterson delivered her sentence. Mental health services at Hiland Mountain face the same systemic challenges that plague Alaska's entire correctional system. With limited resources and overwhelming demand, meaningful psychological support becomes virtually impossible to access. Inmates dealing with depression, anxiety, and the trauma of long-term incarceration often find themselves managing these conditions largely alone. For Brehmer, this means confronting the psychological impact of her actions and her sentence without adequate professional support. The guilt over what she did to Cynthia Hoffman combines with the despair of facing decades in confinement to create a mental health crisis that the system is not equipped to address effectively. The educational and vocational programs available at Hiland Mountain offer limited hope for someone facing a sentence measured in decades rather than years. While other inmates might use these programs to prepare for eventual reintegration into society, Brehmer faces the reality that any skills she develops will likely never be used in the outside world. This knowledge transforms potentially positive activities into cruel reminders of her situation. Learning new trades or completing educational courses becomes an exercise in futility when there is no realistic possibility of applying that knowledge in a meaningful way. Every achievement feels hollow when measured against the enormity of time remaining in her sentence. So here we arrive at the fundamental question that divides people to this day. Is Denali Brehmer's existence behind bars truly worse than execution? Throughout this investigation, we have seen the brutal mathematics of her sentence. 60+ years in Alaska's only women's prison. No transfer options. No escape from the reputation that follows her through every corridor at Hiland Mountain. No hope of experiencing life beyond concrete walls and razor wire. We have witnessed how Alaska's decision to abolish the death penalty in 1957 created a form of justice that some argue is far more devastating than any execution chamber. Finality. Brehmer faces an indefinite extension of the same torment, watching herself age in a cell mirror while the world outside continues without her. Betrayal of Cynthia Hoffman's trust represents one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. A vulnerable young woman with a learning disability was murdered by her best friend for money from an online stranger. That level of calculated cruelty perhaps deserves this level of prolonged accountability. What do you think? Is life imprisonment in Alaska's unforgiving system actually harsher than the death penalty? Has this deep dive into Brehmer's daily reality changed your perspective on what true justice looks like? Tell us in the comments whether you believe her current existence serves justice better than execution would have. One thing remains certain. Denali Brehmer will never know freedom again. Every sunrise she witnesses through barred windows will be a reminder that she destroyed not just Cynthia's future, but her own.